Hi, my name is Chuck Fall, and I am here at the Green Liberty Caucus website doing a media podcast with Reinette Senum. And my co-host is Chris Steiner. He is also a media activist. He and I are both involved in an organization called Truth Action Project. But today I'm wearing my cap as a green libertarian, advancing a green liberty. And I met Reinette through her blog, and I'm going to let her give some background on her media platforms and how you can find her and get more information about what the work she's doing. Um, uh, what I want to just say quickly about the Green Liberty is that we are about accountability, pushing for transparency, supporting the rights of whistleblowers, and that all of this is necessary to protect our democracy and, in effect, stop corruption. And you, Reinette, definitely channel all of this, and that's why I find you so appealing, compelling, and interesting. And you have a number of pokers and a number of fires. So let's just go back and give us an introduction about yourself, your media platforms, and what got you as an activist engaged in what I'm going to call truth politics, because that's what you're engaged in my opinion. Reinette, go ahead.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, I'm here in Nevada City, California. It's in Northern California. I was raised in this county since I was 4 years old. And I got highly engaged in politics and community activism starting in about 2004, 2005. And it was actually really around sustainability. And that was before the United Nations really started to hijack the terminology sustainability. And then, of course, we said, well, we'll be more about resiliency, and they would steal that terminology. And mine's the mom and pop version, not the UN 2021, 2030 agenda, but it's really about building up the local economy and food network and so on. And what got me into this originally, Chuck, was that I was looking at our addiction on oil and all the products produced by it and so on. And I realized it was actually an issue of national security. Now, that was around peak oil. My thoughts of peak oil have changed and evolved over time, but it did get me into really trying to make my community robust as much as possible locally. And I wanted to better the world. I wanted to make the world better, but I didn't have the capacity to change the world. So I thought, well, I'll just focus on my own town. So started a few different nonprofits along the way. One was called Apple, Alliance for a Post-Petroleum Local Economy. And that was about really teaching people about local resiliency and so on. And then I ended up running for a city council here in Nevada City because I saw that the city council was really rubber stamping and not really actively leading and doing things. And I was asking, where do we want to be in 20 years from now, which of course is now. And there was really no vision, no direction, like this is where we want to be. So I ran and I got elected and I became the vice mayor and then the mayor, and I served 4 years, and I was highly, highly engaged. Everything from the homeless, starting a farmer's market, building a fleet of 40 micro houses for the homeless, taking it out into the woods, really working on starting a time bank, sustainability center, really working on resiliency, beautifying the community, teaching people about a sense of place, like really looking and identifying areas in the town that were overlooked and how you could actually really take that back and use that to better your community. So I did that for 4 years, and it was absolutely a fabulous 4 years. And then I jumped off the council, thought I was done. And after 4 years, I was still highly engaged in the community, though, just as engaged, but just not in the council. Then I ran again in 2016. So that was originally 2008 to 12, off the council for 4 years, and ran again for 2016 and 20. And within that 4 years' time, the world had changed a lot. By the time I was back on the council in 2016, it was really 4 years of just putting out fires, of being on the defense over and over and over again. As soon as I was on the council, a few months later, the town of Paradise burned 60 miles from here as the crow flies. And we are in the same kind of terrain. And so I got creative and started to GoFundMe for grazing goats around Nevada City, because we have a lot of green belt that we own. And I called the Goat to Fund Me, and that went viral around the world. And I raised enough money to hire goats and start, grazing and reducing our fire danger. And I just, I consider myself a solutionarian. I love problems. I kind of eat them up for breakfast. I like problems. I like to solve problems. And I come at them with a very creative angle, and I'm willing to go out there and put some skin in the game. I mean, people always say, no, how do you get so much done? I'm like, I work hard. I don't tell you, I just work hard. And so I was doing a lot of defense for those 4 years. And of course, wouldn't you know it, I was mayor when COVID hit. And I am considered controversial. People love me because I get things done, but then they also hate me because I'm controversial. I call out criminality. I call out things that make people uncomfortable. I was calling out Pacific Gas and Electric. I was calling out AT&T and Verizon. I'm fighting against 5G, trying to put ordinances in place to protect ourselves from 5G, trying to stop the proliferation of unnecessary cell antennas. I'm going down to Sacramento and testifying before the Assembly and the Senate, calling out geoengineering, the dangers of smart meters. I mean, the list goes on and on. So as you can well imagine, I take a lot of flack for that.
And you were doing all of that before the arrival of the COVID, is that correct?
Oh, yes, for many years, well over a decade. Yeah.
So let's just, okay, so let me just make an observation, and just because, again, this is to some, for me, this is about identifying you as a leader in a green movement. And who can't be for nature these days? I mean, who can't be, technically speaking, quote, a green? Because if you're not green, then you're not for nature. You subscribe to the 7th generation principle, right. And that is actually a principle that informs the green pillar of ecological wisdom. Right. Just you say you're opposing 5G. I mean, a lot of people would think, well, why are you wasting your time on that? 5G is important. It helps me get my phone connection. And many people, I guess we could say, are oblivious to things you perceive as problematic and needing to be solved. So talk about the 7th generation principle, how you became informed by that, and how that informs your sense and your activism and your call to make some difference. And 7th generation principle is about protecting nature. Isn't that correct?
Right. It's about ensuring that, everything we have today is available 7 generations from now. And so when I got elected, what I've seen in politics, when you have people out there campaigning for whatever position they're running for, they're out there and they're talking to the voters and they're knocking on doors and they're going to events, and it's all about getting the votes. But for instance, here, even at the city council level, once you get into your city council position, it is no longer about serving the people and your constituents. It's about serving the state and making sure the city doesn't get sued and do everything the state mandates and says you have to do. And so I began to ask the question, wait a second, beyond just going out and running again a second time around, how do you measure the quality of my leadership? How do you measure my decision-making beyond getting elected again, which really is not a measurement? And so I started looking around as an activist, and I believe in environmentalism, and I don't mean the climate change version. I used to believe in climate change. I started 501c3s around climate change, and I now apologize. It's a boondoggle. We know it's bull, and we've now had the environmental world become, climate, change activists, and they've just dropped environmentalism in general. And for me, it's about clean water, clean air, clean soil, clean food, having, all this available to everybody, whether you're in the urban setting or in a rural setting. So what I started looking around for was like, how can we measure our leadership and our decision-making? And I was trying to come up with something. And then I realized I didn't need to come up with anything. I just had to look back in time. And now what most people don't know is that the 7th generation, it comes from the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. The 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy are the ones who actually inspired our forefathers to write the Constitution. They have what's called the Law of Peace. And when you put the Law of Peace next to the U.S. Constitution, they're pretty much, verbatim. The thing is, though, is that rather than us really putting attention on the grandmother council and making sure that your decisions are always made through the lens of that 7th generation principle, which is every decision you make today should serve 7 generations from now. Instead of having that grandmother council, instead we decided to have the Supreme Court, right? We put in judges instead of grandmothers, interestingly enough.
Oh,
I don't know how well that's worked out for us all the time, especially these days. And so So I ended up, when I was on the city council in 2020 and I was mayor and COVID hit, I began to see all these COVID lies behind the scenes, and I was calling it out immediately, and I was getting the cries for help, and I was telling people, look, it's not as bad as you think. There's a hidden agenda here. I'm seeing, I'm reading between the lines. I mean, beyond reading beyond between the lines. And there's a nefarious agenda here. And I want to warn you that just go out there, get your vitamin D, and eat well, get your hands in the soil and so on, get some sunshine, and you're going to be okay. And all hell broke out when I said that. And so later
Now,
on,
let me just interrupt. Okay, all hell broke out when you said that, because you're providing a counter narrative to
yes,
the official narrative, and the official.
I am the counter narrative person. That is
Okay,
my job. And I do it quite well. And I don't do it intentionally. It's in my DNA. But what happened was, when I was aware of COVID in January, before anybody really, I was trying to say, hey guys, there's this thing called coronavirus. And I had no concerns about H1N1 or the swine flu. I had no concerns about any of that. This, because I have a pretty good intuition, this caught my attention, like something is coming at us. And so by the time, and I didn't know, I was watching a lot of videos from China and Twitter and so on, which I think a lot of is just pure propaganda. But I knew something was amiss, something was wrong here. So I ended up, when the lockdowns were basically mandated by Governor Newsom, I supported it for only 2 weeks. Like, if you do it for 2 weeks, great, until we can, grapple what's going on here.
and that was in
place.
March. That was March
I
2020.
already knew about coronavirus by January, so I was very well versed on it, as much as I could be at that time. And so I supported that. But then we started having Zoom calls, of course, online with the city council meetings. I saw the reduction of public transparency and also participation. And then I was on Zoom calls every Friday with the public health department for the county and the CEO and the city managers and mayors. And at that point in time, it was a CEO, because people don't realize that your counties and your cities are actually corporations. That's why your county has a CEO. It is a corporation masquerading as a government, essentially. And so I started seeing behind the scenes where I would ask questions. I'd be like, hey, well, what about this? And what about that? And they're talking about boosting immune system. Then why don't we distribute vitamin D and K and C and blah, 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 blah. And why don't we get people outside breathing fresh air? And I would be shut down. Or I'd be told I was asking too many questions, which was more than 2 questions. Or I'd raise my hand and I'd be ignored by the CEO of the county. She was the one running the meetings. And I'd be told to hold on till the end of the meeting. We'll ask your blades in the grass questions. And they just dogpile me in the end of the meetings when everyone was gone. And so I started calling this out. And then later on, when Newsom did his statewide California mask mandate, I went down to our police chief and I said, I'm sorry, Chad, but do you intend on actually enforcing this? Because I don't know how I can enforce it. There's no penal code. I can't enforce something without a penal code. And by the way, it doesn't look that constitutional to me. I'm like, thank you very much. So I went back home, was watching the media, the states. I was watching for other elected officials to cry out the fact that one person, a governor, does not have unilateral power to go out there and force a medical device on everybody's face.
And now let me just interrupt that, because the mask is a very divisive issue, and
by design.
And by okay, so you're in your perspective, the deployment of masking was not a sincere and authentic public health measure. Is that where you're coming at from this?
100%, because the conversations I was having behind the scenes with the public health director and other doctors who I'd considered friends at the time were saying, well, it doesn't really work. And, and people don't know how to wear them correctly. And I was a house painter for 35 years. I've worn those N95 masks forever. And I know how difficult they are. And I know how exhausted I am at the end of the day because I'm not getting my oxygen. And I know that people don't know how to always wear them properly. And you're touching them like a petri dish all day long. You're touching a petri dish. And I would hear one conversation behind the scenes. And then I'd have, and they would tell us, well, people don't know how to wear, so go tell them that. Well, I'd go tell them that, but then they would publicly say something different, and they'd have something different on the website. So here I am going out there speaking the truth, and of course I'd get hammered. So when the mask mandate happened, people in this community know me. They know I love this community. I would die for this community. I spent 2,000 hours in volunteer hours a year, highly dedicated. And then the fact that I turn around and say, hey, don't wear your mask, or you don't have to wear your masks, the community saw that, because this is a very, Nevada City is very liberal and a more purple county. And they saw that as a betrayal. Like, what? Reinette? We thought we knew you. We thought you cared about us. Who are you? It's like I'd gone to the dark side. And so when I went on, I grabbed a Peggy Hall, the Healthy American video, who did a great job, because at that point in time, I did not have any kind of any venue for interviews and so on. So she had a great piece on how legislation is made and how bills and laws are, passed and blah, blah, blah. So I put out there and I called Newsom out saying, you're not King Newsom. You don't have the power to do this. And people go out there and continue to breathe. So then the LA Times and SF Gate, Sacramento Bee, my own community. I mean, poor City Hall was getting bombarded with phone calls and emails, and they were in the crosshairs. And they were basically saying, city council members says, don't wear your mask. I'm actually not saying don't wear your mask. I'm simply saying a governor, one elected official, does not have the right to mandate and force these things on your face. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, let me interrupt that and just make an observation about Gavin Newsom. So basically, you're opening up you're kicking a hornet's nest.
Yes.
And now, in the hornet's nest is because you collided with cognitive dissonance. In other words, we trust our government, we trust our leaders. If Gavin Newsom says it, it must be true. And now, but to just jump ahead, just so that the viewers understand, that Gavin Newsom in the state of California actually full-blown passed law that would sanction physicians that gave a counter narrative to the official narrative about the COVID.
That's right.
And but that doesn't come for another 6 months, maybe 8, 10, 12, whatever months later. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So California actually was very strong on following the mandates, the orders from high above, CDC, NIH, FDA, and so on. So we're back, and this is a good story for people to recall your experience in 2020 in March, and you're resisting, and now you're getting all hell broken loose on you.
Correct. And I also knew by that time too there was a setup. There's some pretext, which was November of 2019 in the state of California. A bill at that time was passed that didn't look too nefarious, because we didn't know what was before us, that gave unilateral power to every public health director in the state of California and every county to determine when to close down schools and churches and businesses and make stay-at-home orders and so on, and possibly force vaccinations. So this power was given to one person who was never elected, not even appointed, but hired by county staff, who is a corporation, who is run by the state of California, and a governor who, I have to tell you, in my opinion, is nothing short of being a CCP foot soldier, Chinese Communist Party foot soldier. That's all he is. Okay. And so you have this usurpation of power through legislation that looked benign at the time, but fast forward 6 months, a year later, and all of a sudden you see there's power given to this person who, by the way, at first had a $250,000 a year salary in the small little rural community of California, and now got bumped up to $500,000. I'm like, oh, good to know how much it costs to sell your soul.
Well, okay. So let's just make an observation. Your kind of philosophy is environmental oriented. You want to protect nature. You want to resist toxins. You want to resist things that are not good for our physical health, mental health, and so on. And but you're also then libertarian, which is to simply say you value personal freedom. I think we probably value our collective freedom as we the people to assemble and make a protest and so on, seek a redress of grievance, in this course. So what I share with you is what I would call this libertarian sensibility. What we share is a concern for nature and an insistence that we be thinking 7 generations out. Of course, that's not happening at all. Greens subscribe to the precautionary principle. I believe you do too, which on one level makes us conservatives. And I'm parsing out on these philosophical, political nuance in order to just kind of demonstrate that this isn't left-right dichotomy, binary issue. This is you're a citizen, you're a elected official, you see stuff happening in your gut, as you say, your intuition, but it's also your pragmatic mind is able to evaluate, is this a good decision or not a good decision? Is this going to work to move the ball forward relative to making things better or not? So all of these red flags are popping up for you. You're speaking up, and now you get, as you say, dogpiled. And so we don't have time. The purpose, we could rehash all of the COVID thing. Let's just jump ahead. When you saw, I mean, our criticism of the federal COVID response is they didn't provide early medical treatment for an infection. If you got a COVID infection, you had to just, in effect, isolate, take a week off, and come back after 12 days. It was a long time, actually. No prescriptive, repurposed medications, no cocktail, whether it be a hydroxy with zinc. Ivermectin later was discovered with zinc, quercetin now and off the shelf with zinc. All of these things work. Pump up the vitamin D. You've talked about that. So you're dialed in on that. What's your reaction to and your sense of the specter of a mass vaccination program? How did you process that, and what was your reaction to it, and what happened? Go for it.
Well, I've never considered myself an anti-vaxxer. I mean, I've had vaccinations in the past when I was traveling to foreign countries. I've had, gabaglobulin. I'm trying to think of it right now.
Gamma globulin, hepatitis.
Right, shots, right? So I've had things like that. So I was not opposed to it. I was concerned about the expansion of the childhood vaccine schedule, mind you. I thought it was unnecessary. It's like it had gotten just too prolific too quickly without the proof behind it. But what happened was when I was in the Zoom calls with our public, health officials and the county and the cities, they were talking about how we need to boost our immune system. I'm like, oh, great. Okay, good. So this is the point where we tell people to get outside, get fresh air, grow your food, distribute the vitamin D and C and the zinc and so on, and educate people about healthy eating and so on. And boy, I got shut down so fast. It was insane, the reaction I got, especially from this chair by the name of Heidi Hall. She literally was pointing at me like this, saying, if you think that we're going to talk about conspiracy theories of your immune system and so on. And I was like, what? That's when I knew, okay, something was up. And the doctors kept shutting down any discussion other than, we got to wait for the vaccinations. We got to wait for the vaccinations. We got to wait for the vaccinations. That's when it's going to happen. And I'm like, First of all, vaccines take up to 10 years. And even then, do we have a good vaccinations for AIDS, for cancer? I mean, what are you talking about? And could not have the discussion. And so it turned sour pretty darn fast. And that's when I had just won my third election to serve another 4 years. And what happened was, after the COVID call out with the mask with Newsom, that was in June, now July 8th, I'm stepping down as mayor, ready to take my oath for the third time. And instead, surprisingly to the council, nobody knew, I read my resignation letter and I called out all my city council members and supervisors for the county. I called them out saying, you're committing crimes against humanity because you have information available to you that's available to me, and you're continuing down this track. You know what you're doing, and we're going to come back in a matter of a few years and we're going to hold your feet to the fire to the highest extent of the law. And I said my goodbye, and boy, did I make more enemies then.
Wow. So major political truth warriors, what you are for doing that. And you took huge. Yeah, let's go. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, just I'm wondering, was any discussion brought up about this will really cost the city, the county, the government money? Look at New York, the losses that they've had for having to reinstate the nurses, the firefighters, emergency workers, and now teachers with back pay. There's just a huge victory from teachers in New York. And I mean, just how did that kind of discussion go?
I actually said that this is going to cost you in the end. I mean, you're going to get sued. It's just, you're setting yourselves up for lawsuits. It's on its way. And I said it during that speech. It's actually on my Substack. I have a recording of that where you see all the city council members and their little eye rolls, and you can see their immaturity and how sophomoric they really were in the response. And I don't think and let me tell you, they've gotten their vaccinations and some of them are not doing well and have even been in the hospital, need a cane to walk. Whatever issues they had before have been exacerbated, and they're quite silent now.
Hey, let me.
Oh, it's unfortunate. And has anybody sued? Has anybody in the process?
No, but it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time. There's enough evidence and injury and death. It's been done. Yeah.
Certainly.
So
All right. Well, I'm glad that New York is kind of pioneering the way for the winning, and
We are.
hopefully it'll encourage other municipalities.
Yes.
So let me jump back in then on the whole, just out of kind of, we're going to speak anecdotally. In your experience, we are advised that the COVID vaccines are, quote, safe and effective. I mean, none of us are physicians here, but we read physician reports, and some of the key reports that I'm aware of come out of Dr. McCullough, Pierre Corey, and there's many more that say that safe and effective is not true, that's in effect a false narrative. So how do you navigate that? Is it real or is it not real? And you're suggesting that you're actually know of people that are getting post-vaccination injuries and all of that. What just I mean, again, we're not doctors, but
we have people we have people dying around us all over the place. Just
you think people are actually succumbing to the vaccine they took?
Oh, 100%. And started, the first one was in 2022. My partner Susan, her great aunt in England had a terrible case of COVID, was in the hospital in the UK, and she survived it. And then obviously she has the antibodies, she doesn't need the shots. Well, they convinced her to get the COVID shot, and boom, next thing you know, next day she was in the hospital, and 5 days later she died of complete organ failure. That was in February of 2022, out of the gate. We now have friends who are getting prions disease, dead within a few days. People 40 years old, perfectly healthy, Christmas morning, family goes to wake them up, died in their sleep. Turbo cancers, strokes, 19-year-olds having strokes, 21-year-olds having heart attacks. A dear friend of mine is a paramedic. So we started holding on Mondays in the spring of 2020. We started holding Monday potlucks with people who are like-minded. They're all new friends. Mm-hmm. And one of them is a paramedic. And at that time, when COVID was at its height, the ambulances were collecting dust. When the shots happened, they couldn't keep the ambulances staffed enough.
Wow.
And I can tell you right now, they're preparing, there's this next round of boosters, and it's strokes, heart attacks. It's young people who should never, ever be suffering from any of these injuries whatsoever. And it's a real issue. And all the paramedics know what's going on, and they'll never take another shot again.
Okay. And anybody who gets majority of their information from their Apple news feeds, their Yahoo news feeds, their New York Times, their Washington Post, their BBC, the Guardian, and so on, would find what you're saying completely foreign.
Yes, because they're listening and reading propaganda. And you have to understand, in 2012, we had what was called the Smith-Mundt Act. And that was a firewall of protection where the US government could not propagandize against Americans on American soil. They could on other soil around the United, but not American soil. Well, they got rid of that in the Patriot Act. They eviscerated that. And that was after 2012 that I started to see a very big change in the media, how I was perceived in the media and presented in the media, and how we were really being very much targeted as Americans. So you have to understand, our US government does not exist. It does not exist. I go down to Sacramento to this day, and I still testify before the Senate. I go and I lobby from door to door to door of our representatives. And when I say, hey, here is a red wagon full of 12,000 pages of a court decision that tells you you cannot legally expand 5G millimeter wave antennas because it is bad for your health, can cause cancer and death. And we say this to our representatives. They say, well, we can't like stop this bill. That'll take off the telecoms. I mean, they're long gone. They serve another master. So this is the thing I said. Yeah, this is important. People will say to me, Reinette, our government would never do that. Our government would never do these things. I'm like, you're 100% correct. Your government never would. But your government that you have in your mind is dead. It's gone. It doesn't exist. Right? It is a global entity that has taken over every government around the world. And it has a propaganda arm that is known as your media that tells you over and over again that what you're seeing is not real. And what they're saying to you is the truth. So it's massive, massive propaganda. Turn off your television. Stop reading the major news outlets. They're the ones who are telling you the lies. And there are some truths. Of course, there's truth. The truth has to cover the lies. But I've been so much on the front lines, from Hurricane Katrina to Occupy Wall Street in Zuccotti Park, New York, to Standing Rock in North Dakota, to Paradise after a burn. I've been to these front lines over and over and over again. South Africa during the height of apartheid in '87, when I was a 20-year-old, and how the media portrays it versus what's really going on are diametrically opposed.
Right.
And look at South Africa now, that they just, fortunately, due to so many people organizing and funding the effort to have the Pfizer contract revealed, that says that they must have no liability. Of course, that we expected to see that, but it also shows that they know that they're not safe or effective. And it is by and for the corporations. And I know I'm so glad to hear that you said you've started a time bank. I think the only way to wrestle power away is to, of course, keep our own productivity to ourselves, our own creative, productive energy to ourselves. Time banks are great. Barter networks, cooperative swap shops. My favorite is a community currency, because it's tangible when it comes to equitable commerce media. What do you think of those solutions? Or do you, because I really, I'd like to integrate a lot of them, the time banks and barter networks into community currency, if I could restart the local one here. Well, how did your time bank work out?
Phenomenal.
Can you comment?
So time bank is, people think it's like a bartering club. It's not that. It's what it is. You become a member of the time bank, and you actually get an online bank account. If you go to Our Nevada Counties, HOUR, ournevadacounty.org, you'll find it there. It's not really operating so much nowadays because of COVID. A lot of people moved away. A lot of people have been injured. They've passed away. But we don't have the membership we used to have. And I've kind of moved on, but I did that for 6 years. I was the administrator from 2014 until COVID hit. It was robust, and it's brilliant. And so what I tell people, and I will be doing a Substack on it actually here this coming week, because I think the timing is important, is basically what it is you join the time bank, you are credited 2 hours, and then let's say I go out there and I clean your gutters. Well, you give me you credit me an hour worth of my time. It was an hour's worth of work or 45 minutes, whatever it is, you get those minutes, you get those hours. And that's, and time, it becomes the currency essentially. And so then I've got this hour in my time bank, and then I go out to the seamstress who I need her to, sew up my pillows. And then I give her my, the 2 hours that I needed for her to do the sewing. And so it's not bartering, where it is, with bartering it's a little more complicated. Like, okay, I need some seamstress work and you're a mechanic. It's not going to work. So and what it is, and I tell people, it's a paradigm shift, because what you realize is that we've been conditioned to believe that in order to have an exchange, you got to have a dollar right between it, or some zeros and ones on your computer.
The brand allegiance to the dollar.
Right. Or oil or gold and silver, whatever. I'm like, no. And no, this is revolutionary. This is why. And when I did when I did the time bank in 2014, I was doing it as a beta. I wanted to see if this could work, because I was concerned about our future. And so there you go. That's it right there. And so I had someone a few years before COVID hit, say, Reinette, we need to go out there and expand and promote. I said, no. I said, we're not ready yet. This is ready when we're on the brink of the whole economy failing. I think we're actually now ready. And so I tell people that, look at what you don't realize is that you can literally, even if you can't get online and put together a website in an official, time bank, you can literally get a little book, a little notebook, and you can actually do that. And accounting for everybody has their notebook, and they can do that. And people say, well, how do you know to trust people? Like, well, first of all, you got to trust your guts, your gut feeling. And if you feel like somebody's not being honorable, then they're not part of your time bank. So you can actually today start a time bank, jumpstart your own local currency, and the asset is kindness. And I'm not speaking theoretically here. I'm speaking from 6 years of experience. And not only were we able to do that, but when I was not on the council, I convinced the city of Nevada City in California to allow me to become the Federal Reserve of Good Intentions. And I, as the admin of Our Nevada County, I donated hundreds of time bank hours to the city So that when I went out there and I did citywide spring cleanings and fall cleanings, we were like, painting the curbsides and repainting the gas lamps and pulling weeds and picking up trash. I would have members of the time bank help, and I would then give them time bank hours as the city. The city would give them time bank hours for them helping beautify the city. We go out there and we do town halls. Volunteers, they'd be members of the time bank. The city would then able to give them time bank hours. And so what people don't realize is we have been convinced that we had to have zeros and ones, we had to have oil or a fiat currency known as the dollar, when actually you can use your own kindness and your goodwill as the currency. And that is a game changer.
And let me
Yeah,
just,
why would people trust a bank rather than trusting their own neighbors when it comes to asking for a loan, for instance, and probably a much lower much lower indebtedness, with less interest or usury, I suppose.
Right.
And and here's a point that Wayne Walton we had. I'll put up on the screen here. We had. If you want to check out on Truth Action Project's page or a Rumble page here, August 4th, we had a monetary reform and the truth about money and solutions. And Wayne Walton was a guest there talking about community currency that he's helped start several around the country. And he's made the point that, in other municipalities that they've once a community currency gets popular enough, then you approach the Chamber of Commerce and try to get their endorsement. Regardless, then you can go to the city and the county and say, well, since you're always crying poor for more money, for higher utility rates, higher taxes, then how about you just allow your public employees to be paid if they opt in a certain amount in the community currency, and as an incentive we'll throw on another certain percentage, and then that way you can help meet your get back in the black.
Right. Well, there's so much more you can do, right? I mean, you're not dependent upon what's in your actual bank account. And the other thing is too, what's really important about this now more than ever is that the creator of the USA Time Bank, Dr. Edgar Kahn, back in the 90s saw, the whole entire, social credit, the social system and the banking system, the dollar losing its value. He's just starting to crumble, and the social services crumbling. And he had seen that, the core economy that we used to have, our grandparents had, which was neighbors and family and friends helping each other, had been replaced by the dollar economy, which worked while the dollar was fairly valuable. But now people could not afford to have somebody come and clean out the gutters or repair their electrical and so on. And our neighbors and our friends and our family were no longer there, and we have not been flexing that muscle. So the time bank was essentially a vehicle to get that core economy back into flow again. So ultimately, the objective would be that you don't need a time bank. We just do it for each other. And that's the thing. So right now, the reason why I did a Substack on time banking a year ago, but it's much more important to do it now because we see, right, the digital banking coming our way, the currency coming our way, and we're getting all the warning signs, like we're on that precipice. So
both FedNow and BRICS.
We're 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Right. We see it. It's all crumbling. So they're going to replace it with something, and it's certainly not going to serve us. And so we have to have a way to ensure that at a local level, we can care for ourselves immediately, that we can make that transfer right away without any type of monetary investment. It's like literally, you want to get online, you can do it and start up a time bank. But if you need to, just get your little notebook. And it's based on the honor system. And if someone's not being honorable with you, then you don't do business with them, right? It's a good way to raise the standards and the bar. But I want people to know about this now. So when that time comes, because we know it's going to come, they're telling us, that we can say, oh, okay, we're going to do a time bank. I got my notebook ready. You can start with your immediate circle. You can start with your church, your school, your garden group, and you start your time bank there. And then you just slowly expand out, get to know everyone's skills. And this is how humanity operates. But we've been removed out of a real true humanity and real powerful, healthy circles. We don't operate and function that way. And the time bank actually brings that back into place again.
Hey, let me
Right,
jump
and
in.
a lot of
Chris,
a
I'm
lot
going
of
to
folks.
interrupt you. Chris, excuse me.
All right.
I'm going to take the mic back and invite you, Reinette, to schedule a time to join Chris on Liberation Radio and speak at greater length on this topic. And Chris, thanks for bringing it up. And it's one that the Green Party should be advancing strongly. This because one of our pillars is grassroots democracy, which isn't just about electing civically with your political leaders, but it's actually about being in leadership and advancing the kinds of economy that you're describing. And with what's coming down the pike in terms of the digital currencies, what is the strength of the dollar, the flipping of the economy, and so on. There is a movement for what you're describing, and there's a lot of people doing this. So that would be something that I hope Chris can take to the next level at another interview. We're not gonna go over an hour. You are engaged, Reinette, in litigation. I mean, if you're also being sued. I don't want to by Simone Gold. If you wanted to make a remark about that, you may, but you're advancing litigation against illegal geoengineering. Most people might have heard of this as a kind of chemtrails. Many people do not believe that there is an illegal geoengineering program going on. If you read mainstream media, you will have read a news story that tells you that these thick plumes that emanate from the behind an airplane at high altitude is the consequence of the airplane passing through an area where there's a thick particulate mass, gets pulled into the engine, and then is heated up and then made visible. Now, this is one of the official explanations. If you follow the Dane Wigington material at Geoengineering Watch, he's a full-blown he follows patents and makes the argument that, in fact, there is an ongoing geoengineering program going on. It's, I guess, national security, so it's a secret, and it is not acknowledged. I can see something happening. What's your response to this discussion and claims, fake, not fake, real, not real, around these plumy emanations that follow airplanes flying high overhead?
Well, if you go to weathermodificationhistory.com, that's Jim Lee's website. We're spanning back in late 1800s when weather modification started with silver iodide, shooting it off, through canisters into the sky. Power companies like Pacific Gas and Electric have been doing it for decades. In Ho Chi Minh Trail during the Vietnam War is when we actually, for the first time, used weather modification as a type of warfare. And it was actually soon after that, there was actually a global ban of using weather modification during a time of war, not during a time of peace. And so it started with silver iodide. And there's actually been lawsuits in the past in America where there have been ranchers and farmers where levees have broke because they were doing silver iodide, shooting it out there. And there's a deluge of water. Thank you for that. And it, broke the levees and they lost their ranch or their farms. And so it's been there. But what we know is there's a multitude of different layers to this. It's highly, highly complicated. It is not an easy lawsuit to undertake. And that is why you don't see a lot of lawsuits around this, because it's very complicated. But so we'll start with this. What Jim Lee here, and this is his website, taught me recently is that back in like 96, 97, they changed commercial jet fuel. It's called JP8. And it's called single-use fuel that they use for commercial, military aircraft, Black Hawk helicopters, tanks, you name it, military vehicles. It's just a single-use fuel that can use universally. But the problem is that he was telling me there's all this heavy metals, because last winter we had a historic winter and snow load here in the Sierras. I mean, our forests are an absolute mess because of what happened and what we endured. And we had people around the state of California testing the water, the rainwater and the snow. And it was extraordinarily high in aluminum, barium, strontium, cobalt, lead, soot, copper. I mean, in our rainwater, in our snow. Well, I come to find out from Jim Lee, he's like, well, that's in the jet fuel. And I said, well, when did they start putting all these heavy metals in the jet fuel? He goes, well, they're not putting them in. They just never took it out. They don't refine it out. It's just, it would cost more. So it's got all these heavy metals. But what they do with the commercial aircraft is this, and this is very fascinating, is we back in the 70s had like 70-some thousand flights a day. In the 90s, we had like 95,000, commercial aircraft, flights a day. Today, we have 100,000 commercial air flights at any given time. And there is a supercomputer, one supercomputer that runs all the commercial airlines. And what it does is those pilots will take off, hit their altitude. At that point in time, the supercomputer will take control of the airplane. And then once the plane is landing, the pilots will then land the plane, like they'll take control back and actually land it. This supercomputer takes all those commercial aircrafts and it actually grids it out according to how they want to manipulate the weather.
Goodness.
Now, it scares me on a national security level that there's one supercomputer flying 100,000 flights at the same time. All you need is one good hacker in there to take all those flights down. Could you imagine losing 100,000 flights at the same time, what that would do? I'm telling you, it's insane what our government is allowing us to happen. So there's that. So the commercial aircrafts have now been basically weaponized. Then you have the secret programs. You have DARPA, you have the military, you have the United States government who are way up there at 50, 60,000 feet, drones spraying. You can't even see the aircraft. They just create a general haze way up high. Then you have the smaller planes, they're Cessnas, they're much more localized. And they're actually working for the power companies, for the universities, for the research organizations. For the one company, the startup that we're looking to sue called Make Sunsets Inc., we're going to start with suing them because they have a 200-year contract, essentially. They're going to go out there and spray the whole entire planet. And you can see go, this is all conspiracy theory. It's like, no, it's not. We know about them and hundreds of other applicants because they have to. They're required by U.S. law to file with the Department of Commerce and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They're required by law to report their weather modification programs, and then they have to do reports. It's on. Just go to NOAA and look at weather modification, and you'll see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these applications. And so it makes sense. That's put in their little application saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. And basically, it's not even an application. It's just like, this is what we're going to do. Wanted to let you know. They don't vet them and they don't do environmental impact statements. And that's our thing. It's like, how can you allow these companies and universities and so on go out there and spray us with aluminum, spray us with whatever they want to, proprietary compounds. We don't even know what those are, what's in them. And so that's our beef. So
now let me interrupt you, because so basically you're describing that the litigation that you're advancing, and you're not doing this by yourself. There must be a team that you have, and you're targeting one of the contract companies that basically has a contract or a license to spray a product for some purpose. Now that company, I assume, is subject to a non-disclosure agreement, a secrecy agreement. Is that, how are you going to?
No, what it is that they are a startup company that's going out there and essentially selling carbon credits, saying, hey, the more money you give us, the more we're going to dim the sun. And we're going to reduce climate change.
That's their business model right there.
That's it.
And oh my God.
Yeah, go to makesunsets.com. They'll say, we got this much money in the bank. This is how much we're going to spray. And what happened was they got banned in Mexico last year because they were in Baja California releasing these weather balloons full of sulfur and other things and proprietary compounds. And the Mexican government found this out and they said, we don't want you, so they actually banned experimental geoengineering. But I have to tell you, all geoengineering is experimental. Any professional geoengineer will tell you, nobody really can tell you the outcome of geoengineering because the climate and the weather is so dynamic. It is too dynamic to be able to forecast. So when you manipulate it, you are literally playing with fire.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to let Chris kind of have a question. Chris, what's your reflect on what you've learned from Reinette? I mean, we could go longer, and we can talk a little bit. We're not to end hard at the end of the hour, but
we started a little bit late.
We started a little bit late, but I'm quite impressed with the scope of. I mean, we just touched the surface of what you've been up to in your life. You've been a lifelong activist. You're driven by a skepticism of a natural skepticism, I will say, about all things. You have a strong pragmatic orientation. I think you are absolutely the kind of person the Green Party would want to recruit. You have an actual, you are in elected office. This is not a recruitment effort for me right now. It's an invitation to consider building these activist communities that we need, of people that will stand strong and draw attention to what I call big lies, in effect. And they happen multiple levels in multiple ways. So Chris, you're gonna be able to have Reinette on in the future for your reporting. What kinds of what's your inclination, and where would you like to see a conversation with Reinette go?
Oh, well, the detoxification so that we can continue the fight. I think, from chemtrails especially, you can't stop our fields from being sprayed. So I was wondering, Reinette, have you heard of using ionized water to soak your food in order to draw out those contaminants?
I have not, but I mean, that would make sense. I mean,
It's
I,
it's an electrostatic adsorption, not absorb, but AD as in door, zorb, and through the van der Waals forces, it's called. If folks want to check that out, it's 3 words: VANDERWAALS. So with freshly ionized, highly alkaline water, soaking your food, it actually because the negative antioxidant charge will draw out the positive or oxidative or free radical contaminants, most of which are positively charged, from deep within the plant or animal tissue. Soaking your feet is good, or soaking your body, spraying it on, getting out of a shower really feels great. Drinking it, of course, that's what I do. I've been drinking it for 13 years, and you can really notice a difference in taste after just 10 minutes of soaking food in maybe 11.5 pH water. So that's just one thing I wanted to throw out there, since this is the first time we've had a chance to speak, and let the audience know that there are things that we can do to help detoxify, that incredible things, simple technologies that are very inexpensive, that we can protect ourselves to continue the fight, and bolster our spirits.
And Chris,
I
let
had
me,
not
yeah,
heard
go
of it,
ahead.
by the way. So
Go ahead,
I'm
Reinette, and then
a little,
I'll close out with a remark.
the Vanderhausen, is that what you said?
Van der Waals, so that's VAN, then a next word is DER,
Yeah,
then WAALS as in Sam,
great.
forces, Van der Waals forces.
Never had heard of that, and it makes complete sense. I mean, generally, what I do but I like dealing with your food before you consume it. Generally, what I do is, the bentonite clay,
Same
Epsom
thing,
salt baths, and so
exact
on.
same principle.
Yeah, it's constant, right? You're never done. You have to just do it essentially at this point in time for the rest of your lives. And I have to say,
Awesome.
people often ask, are we going to be able to get out of this? I said, no matter what, we will survive. How many survive? That's kind of up to us. But I have to say that we will be spending the rest of our lives healing and restoring this planet and our bodies and everything around us. And we will be building economies based upon restoration and healing, because we will have no other option but to do so. And I look forward to that day, because we have been in an economy of raping and pillaging and stealing and so on. So I look forward to actually countering that and focusing on that for the rest of our lives.
Well, then let's
Right.
Chris, we're gonna end this on that note. And the note that you just said is, our future has to be about building a commons that restores nature. And to Chris's point, a commons that uses nature and is built on nature and is against the toxins. And the toxins are ubiquitous, whether it's physical toxin, whether it's microwave toxin from the 5G, whether it is now toxins that are being sprayed from the geoengineering. And I'll just say about Robert Kennedy, who's running for president. He was asked, do you support Medicare for all? And he didn't affirm that. And he said, well, if I'm president, I'm going to address chronic illness, because the chronic illness is the elephant in the room of our healthcare system. Chronic illness is associated with all of these toxins. and whatever. And now with the COVID vaccine, we've introduced a whole nother toxin that's showing up as quote long COVID or vax impact, whatever VADES or whatever they're calling it. So I think your vision for restoring commons and rebuilding commons and is really where we need to keep this conversation going and take it to the next level. Reinette, give us a closing remark. How do people find you, Reinette? You have 2 media platforms.
Well, actually, I have several. So there is Reinette Senum's foghornexpress.substack.com. You just showed that. And I'm very, very active on that. I do have also saveourskies.org. That is also where I give updates on the geoengineering lawsuits. And people say, well, how long will it take for you to file? I said, well, that depends on how much money we raise. We raised $50,000. We've got to raise now about $250,000 to fight this, believe it or not. Just the first round, it's going to be a series of lawsuits. So the more we raise, the more the attorneys can work. And if I don't have lots of money coming in, I can't pay them. So it's really, it's incumbent upon us. And we've got some events coming up. We've got a big fundraiser on October 6th, unconventional gray screening. And then I do webinars online to teach people how to be on the grounds, to educate the public officials and the public about geoengineering. It's not what people think. So that's Save Our Skies. Then there's Gen 7. That's GENSEVEN. Gen 7 is the newly formed 501c3. And that is the umbrella for Save Our Skies. Gen 7 is about that 7th generation principle and teaching people about that and how to institute it through referendum movements. And then my older blog, which has more information on me personally, is The Foghorn Express, thefoghornexpress.com. And that's my old blog before I went to a Substack. So I've got
and the word foghorn comes from your relative. And just give us the story, and then
right. Well, it is known as, right, you're trying to warn people, but it's along the coast. But there it is. It comes from, actually, I have a great grandfather who was a 3-term congressman and senator from Congress, and he was Speaker of the House, and he was 6'4" during the Civil War. And he had a big booming voice, and his tagline when he was running was "Foghorn Funston, a farmer's friend." And so I also have a booming voice, which can be to my advantage as well as to my detriment. It depends on how I use it or if it gets me into trouble. But I do have a booming voice, and I'm simply just trying to use my voice to speak for the voiceless, to speak for the silent, to speak for those who are afraid. And I realized that, I've got it. I might as well use it for the betterment of man.
Okay.
All right.
And my name's Chuck Fall, and I'm speaking from the Green Liberty Caucus website. My co-host is Chris Steiner, Liberation Radio, Reinette Senum.
Liberation Station.
Liberation Station.
TheLiberationStation.com.
Okay. All right.
That's all right. Right up there on the screen.
Yeah, give us a flash on it. I'm going to end the recording, and then we'll just chat a little bit afterwards, Reinette, before we let you go. And so again, if anybody, for those watching this, thank you for your time and getting this important report. This is the end.
Thanks, Reinette.
Thank you.
Okay, we just ended the recording. Well, you are frontline truth warrior, and my heart goes out to you. And I'm very happy to become your friend and an activist in this cause. So, well,
that's the benefit of COVID. COVID has really brought us together. I have to tell you, I didn't realize how unconnected I was to the warriors of the world. So it's really great to be here with everyone. This is the benefit of COVID.
So can I share your phone information with Chris?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Chris, I'll share from my cell phone Reinette's phone number. She does take text messaging, and so Chris and I are both in a group called Truth Action Project. They would love to have you on at some point. Right. Chris wants you on. Maybe Chris, the Liberation and TAP will all do just one program, and and so on. Okay, we're gonna go. Bye, Reinette. Have a great day.
Thank you guys so much, Chris. So nice to meet you, and great to see you.
I wish we had more time. I just got to run too.
So, I know. Don't you worry.
Put my phone number in the chat there.
I got it right here.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Bye, Chuck. Thank you.
Bye, Reinette.
All right. Take care.
Bye, gentlemen.